O God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, you who are our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. I have notes today, and it's a little small piece of paper, because when I start talking about this, I can go on and on and on and on, and I want to make sure that I don't completely bore you and have everybody fall asleep while I'm in here. When I was in seminary, we had to, every seminarian had to go on a cross-cultural experience. Many people went to Latin or South America. Some people went to Africa. Often it was out of the United States, but there was a group of us that had interests in Native Americans and wanted to go and immerse ourselves in that culture. And I want to share with you some of the differences in culture that I think inform how we deal with one another. Because the reality is that there are cultural differences. I noticed, it was pretty interesting, as we read I'm not sure whether it was the call to worship or or something else, but when we read that, the word R-O-U-T-E was in there. And we're split about 50-50. About half of you said root, and about half of you said route. That's a cultural difference. It's what did people call it when you were growing up? In my family, my sister is quick to point this out whenever we get together, we didn't have pillows on your bed. There weren't pillows. For some reason, my parents from Montana called them pillows. If it were an E there. Lots of differences that can be blocks to communication, but when we pay attention to them, they can be very helpful. So my first experience of Native Americans when I went on this cross-cultural experience was with Indian time. When we got to South Dakota, we met with the area conference minister who was kind of leading our group through this experience to some extent. And he said, okay, we're going to have to get up early in the morning because we have to go to worship tomorrow. And worship is at 10 o'clock. And it's about 2.5 hours away. So we're going to have to leave by, make sure that we're there early, about 3 hours early. And we're all kind of tired after all the driving on the way out there, but we said, okay, that's all right, we'll be up. And so we got up, and he's pushing us. He said, we got to get going. We got to get going. And about halfway there was a restaurant, and he said, well, let's pull over here and stop for breakfast. And we're all looking at him like, well, wait, you were rushing us out of there so we would get here on time. Well, no, I figured out we could have breakfast here. So we're having breakfast, and he's lollygagging around. He's not worried anymore about getting there on time. And so finally we started pushing him, and he said, okay, let's go. So we got there, and we got there about 10 minutes late. And we're feeling really bad about this. I mean, we came all this way to come there. 10 minutes after the service was supposed to start, and there was one person there. The person who had the responsibility to put out the fry bread. And she just happened to be there. The pastor showed up about 45 minutes later. And our guide told us this is your experience of Indian time. Because of their culture. Because it didn't so much matter being there right on time. It was when you could do things. You know, you had morning things and you went out hunting and you did the cooking and you were always working, but time didn't really matter too much. So the whole idea of being on time, can you imagine coming here to worship and I didn't show up till 10 o'clock? I think there'd be some unhappy folks here. But that's one of the ways that I experienced a difference. And so if we're going to try to teach people about our God, we need to do it sometimes within the context of their own culture. As I watched Native Americans, and one of the next things that we did, we went to a mission conference where we tented. Now, we knew that we were going to have to do this, so we brought tents and sleeping bags and all of that kind of stuff. And we were out in the middle of the prairie, really. Cindy and Pam, you were just in South Dakota, right? There's a lot of just prairie, right? And it's flat and it's dry. Now, about a quarter mile from our campground, which was kind of surrounding the church there was a stream, or really a stream bed, because it was dry by then. There was, a little trickle of water that wide in it, and it was sometimes, as wide as this room. And there were about 80 of us who were there. And when we got there, it was a wonderful mission conference. A mission conference of the Dakota Association of the United Church of Christ. Now, it was exciting. They had good speakers and such. But we all noticed one thing, and that was that the older folk all wore clothes like I'm wearing. Mostly it was white shirts and a tie and black pants. Because they had been taught, unfortunately, by our forebears, that to be Indian was bad. And so they were taught, in order to accept this faith that we're bringing to you, you have to let go of all that you are and become like us. Now, the younger folk didn't like that so much. They were beginning to use their own cultural imagination to speak to the needs that Christ talked about. Let me give you an example. One of the opportunities that I had was we were the very first religious group officially recognized by a Native American Sundance. Now, you would think that's a big deal. The other cultural norm in Native American culture is that nothing is a big deal. They don't get too excited about anything, except maybe dancing. And dancing for them is prayer. Think about that. Dance is prayer. Let me just try to describe it. Now, they recognized us by, we prayed over some mostly tobacco, because that's what they would burn, and then hung it on the tree that was the center of the Sundance. Now, the reason why we were the first ever to be recognized is that the Sundance had only been, the prohibition had only ended a couple of years before that. For decades before that, Native Americans were not allowed to practice that part of their religion. And so we were there and we were present. And I had heard about the Sundance. Has anybody ever heard of a Sundance? okay, and some of the things that go along with it. Now, there are movies where it's been there, and it really is different than that. So, this is a little bit gross, so I'll just warn you. A Sundance is where people dance as a sacrifice, a sacrificial prayer, and for them, that prayer would never be for themselves. It was always for someone else. At that particular time, and really almost all the time now, those prayers are for friends, family members who have trouble with alcohol. Because of the kind of diet that Native Americans have, as well as a variety of other things, alcohol is a very huge problem for them. But they would be praying for someone else. And what would happen was they would take these little pieces of wood, almost about the diameter of a pencil, and either one or both sides of the chest, they would connect it to. They would pull out the skin like this, they would pierce it, and then they'd attach the rope to the tree, with tree being this post that was in the middle. And then they would go toward the tree, and 3 times they would dance out until the skin is actually being pulled out. The last time that they would go, they'd go very fast, and they would break the skin and that piece of wood out of their own body. And although I'd heard about it, and it sounded pretty gruesome, when you saw it, it really didn't seem that bad. You know, how many people, as kids, okay, kids, close your ears. How many people as kids have put pins or needles through the dead skin, like in their palm, you know? Has anybody ever done that? Am I the only one who's, yeah. I mean, most of us have done that. And it looked kind of like that, but no, I mean, certainly a little worse. And you could see how many Sundances people had been at because they had these scars from it. And I thought, okay, well, that's not too bad. But everybody that I saw dancing were pretty big. And then a smaller, younger guy danced. And he did all of the same things. They pierced him. He was attached to the tree. He danced back 3 times, and the last time he went back very fast. And he's going back, and it was supposed to break, except it didn't. And his feet went out from under him, and he went smack on the ground. And then I thought, oh, this is pretty gruesome. And finally, they tried it again, and the interesting thing that happened was there were a lot of dancers, and the person who had not detached when he ran back, the next time, there were 6 or 8 other dancers behind him, and it was almost like they were supporting him with their spirits as well. And in addition to that, they were there to catch him so he wouldn't go flat on his face again. And that second time that he ran back faster and he had that support, he broke. Now, they can also attach in the back. And when they do that, they usually use like a buffalo skull, and they'll walk around there's a tent pole in the middle, a tree in the middle, long, very long poles, at least as long as a telephone pole, but just straight up. And then there is interwoven with there's kind of a trestle around the whole thing in a big circle. And there's branches and such covering the top, and that's where everybody sits out of the sun. And the people dance in the center. And so there was one man who attached on the back, and what you do is you run around the circle and hope that it gets caught around one of those poles, and it just pulls out. And this guy ran around about 3 times, and he was an older man, and he was a little overweight and not in great shape at all. and then he's just kind of plodding around, and everybody's feeling bad for him. And then again, they would cut so that it would be a little easier, and then they attached it to the tent itself. But think about it. Think about the visual of this, and this is what I was thinking about. Here we have someone attached to a tree who is sacrificially being hurt as a means of praying for other people. The connections with our own faith are very clear. Jesus on a tree, there as a sacrifice. So when we get to know someone else's culture, how they live and who they are, sometimes that helps us to lift up some of the issues. One of the other things that happened was we went to the Black Hills. Now, before they went, I tried to, give Cindy and Pam an indication of the Black Hills are very sacred to Native Americans, especially the Lakota, the Dakota, Nakota, the Sioux Indians. When I was at this mission conference that was out in the middle of nowhere with only one stream that didn't even have any water in it, about a quarter of a mile away, and there were about 80 of us there, and we were all camping, and there was one water faucet at the church. One. And so you had to get your water early for it to be nice and cold, and for it to be as clean as possible, because it was coming up from a well. And so we would get our water in a bag, and we'd put it in our tent, and we were very careful to use it sparingly to take care of things. And by the end of 3 or 4 days that we were there, we didn't smell very good at all. But when we left there, we went to the Black Hills. And I remember as we went, and it's the plains, and I'm from the West, so I love the plains. There's a beauty there that is wonderful. But after a while, and you dry, and it's flat, and it's sunny, and it's hot, you are just aching for cool, refreshing air and water and such. And so when we drove into the Black Hills, it was almost like the evergreens, as we're going into the hills, and the streams that are rushing beside the road, nourished you. I mean, I know that there was no physical exchange of moisture, but there sure was a spiritual exchange of moisture. You felt refreshed by that presence. The Black Hills were very sacred for these people because of things like that. Because they were cool, they were very refreshing, there was water there, lots of game. And as we were there, we stayed at a Christian camp. It was actually a combination, UCC, Lutheran camp. Kids could go there, adults could go there. There was a Presbyterian camp not too far away, and there was a United Methodist church or camp that was maybe 10 miles from where we were staying. And about 15 miles from us was Yellow Thunder Camp. And I want you to think about this. Yellow Thunder Camp was a protest camp. Because although there was a joint UCC Lutheran Christian camp, and there was a Presbyterian Christian camp, and there was a United Methodist Christian camp, Native Americans were not allowed to have their own religious camp in this, the most sacred place in their whole territory. And so they were protesting that. They just camped there. And every once in a while, we'd have some BIA that would come in there and try to get them out, but they stayed until they were finally permitted to have a camp there, probably 5 years after I left. Our passages that we deal with today, the one that Keith read, is how in Amos' time, God is speaking through Amos to the people of Israel and saying, look, you may say you love me. You may say that you're faithful. But I look at what you do, and you're not treating each other very well. You're not treating strangers well. You're not even treating your neighbors well. You cheat them. You're just focused on accumulating for yourself. The passage from Luke is a weird one, isn't it? Here's this manager who is mismanaging things, and when the business owner comes and speaks to him and says, you're going to be fired, you're out of here, he goes out and tells people, okay, you owe this much, well, here, you can pay only half of that. You got only 80% will I make you pay. He makes some deals with some of those people around him. And the person who owns the business actually compliments him about that. Because, and this is a parable that Jesus tells. And Jesus says, those people around you are much wiser in the way that they deal with one another. You have to be thoughtful about that too, but in a different way. You need to use your assets, not to accumulate more and more and more. Not to keep yourself secure and away from all of those people. But you need to use your assets, like we will on Saturday, to give it to others, people who are in need. The way we treat one another speaks volumes about our love for God. Amen. Beloved God, thank you for opening our eyes in different ways. It's not always easy to completely understand, but we are trying. Help us to keep our focus on loving you and knowing that caring for those around us is an important part of our love for you.